Welcome to the channel. This is Reliable Rudy. Just give me a couple moments while I get a couple things set up and we will get this stock market recap underway. Before we get going, as you guys know, I'm not a licensed financial advisor. Everything in this video is merely my opinion. I believe in the short run, the stock market is simply a big voting machine. I have a vote, person next to me has a vote, person next to him has a vote. Some people have bigger votes than others. But in the long run, stocks, I believe the stock market will, in the long run, it will be a weighing machine. It will trade near its intrinsic value. So that being said, I think everything looks good. The volume sounds good, and we are ready to get this underway. So starting with the NQ, man, what a green day! Nasdaq up 2.25%. The SPY up 2% and the Dow up percent and 3/4. Uh, yeah, crazy day in the market. I mean, if I were to just scroll through the watch list over here, you can see all the movers that we've had on the day. Pretty crazy day. So hopefully some of you were able to take advantage of that, and if you weren't, there's going to be more days ahead that are like this, in my opinion. Uh, just got to be picky and choose the right days to do so. So let's go over to the sticky notes that we posted for today. We got the Twitter account pulled over here, so let's go to the first one that we posted for today. Okay, this one's the first one. Had 18 people look at it. Okay, KNX, ton of support, 57 to 56. Closed Thursday's trading day at 56.86. If it gaps up, orders will be off 57 and 56.90. If 56 cracks, you got the 200 day at 54, give or take. Solid chart setup over 58. I would say this is bullish. So let's go take a look at KNX. We did have a couple fills on this name today, and pretty good movement. This is just how my chart is set up at the moment. We can go look at the trading that took place on this name today. So here is the close from yesterday. It shows it on the 15-minute chart down here at 56.80. But if you go over to the daily, this is our closing price. You can see it closes at 56.86. So we did have a couple fills on this name today. So what did I say? If it gaps up, I'm going to have orders off of 57. This first candle comes down to 57.02. So I just barely missed the fill by 2 cents on this name. But I had my eyes elsewhere. I wasn't even aware that this came down and kind of wicked like that. We end up getting that first fill. Now when I felt my phone vibrate, I went over, looked at the chart, and I instantly threw the order in off 56.90. Now you can see uh, when I get filled on 56.90, all I simply have right here, this is how my chart has left off, is that we had this uptrend and we closed right at this uptrend. So the gap up with the market being strong, I simply said, hey, this is wicking into the uptrend. Let's give it a little bit of time. And we end up putting in this stair step action. And you see how this kind of retests this previous high. So when you take out this high, you retest it and you set another high right there. And now we're sitting here pretty strong. So let's just clear out the chart and let's just keep this uptrend in right there. Now, as you can see, early signs of a U-shape. If it wants to pull back into this 57 again, I probably will dip into it a little bit more. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be a guaranteed trade. Over 58. So let's just go mark 58 real quick. Why do I think over 58 is bullish? Is because you go over to this previous high. I don't want it to wick into 58, even though it could reject it initially, but that is why I'm going to continue respecting this uptrend if it wants to play out. So now what I'm looking for this name is just the strong chart setup. Now 58 runs over to this previous high over here as well, so I'm looking at a nice move through 58 if we can get it. If it doesn't want to pull back. Now, one reason why I like this, one, you get your positive break, where over here, you get a move up to that 58, your relative strength isn't there. You try to break 58 again, it kind of gives you that positive break on relative strength, but ultimately kind of pulls back. Now, where do we pull back to? This is a longer term uptrend that I would say that this name has. You know, this could probably pull back over to here, but I like this nice, strong double bottom higher low. And why do I like this one is because it's able to kind of break over top of this high. You get the retrace. Now, when it retraces, all we do is simply just, this is a left leg neckline, builds a higher low. You get the extended right leg, you retest that neckline for another breakout. Now when it falls down, this is where we kind of start building this uptrend. And right here, this fourth point of contact, for an uptrend, I like 3 points of contact. So if this is 2 points of contact, you get that third point of contact right here. Your fourth point of contact, this is the action that we've gotten since, and we get that clean positive break on relative strength. So that is what I like in this name right here in particular. And two, it's a profitable company, decent growth year over year, and it pays a dividend. So I think this is a name that I can swing for a higher price, trim on the ways up, and hopefully collect a dividend. And hopefully the strength is still holding before we get that negative break or a crack of this trend line. So as you can see, a couple good fills right here. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that this was the greatest trade in the world because obviously there was a lot of movers in the day, but off of this second entry that we had 56.80, you know, percent and a half in the money on that second fill. So I feel pretty good about the trade, and I feel confident holding this one into the close. I think we're gonna get some good continuation on this, especially if it gets over 58. So that was KNX. That was the first fill of the day, I believe. I could be mistaken. So let's go over and look at the next post of the day. CTSH above 62 is a strong setup. Under 62, let it settle. Why do you want to let it settle? Because it has pretty good support, 61 to 59. It should find support somewhere in that range. Under 58, you know, I'd be surprised if this got under 58 before we had some good outs on it. Simply because I really like the earnings report, and I think that the chart setup is reasonable for continuation. If it does happen, you know, you have a gap fill at 54 is your downside risk short term that I would say. So let's go take a look at CTSH. This was also one of the sticky note names from yesterday. So kind of an indecision day, and I'm not surprised that it's an indecision day. So this isn't a name that I really added more to today. I'm okay with the position that I have right now. But why do I like that 62 support is because you have your 200 days slightly underneath of it, but you have this neckline right here. If this wants to pan out, where I would be very happy with this trade is if this is a left leg neckline, you build a higher low, and we can actually get some price action up near these highs again. Is what I would really want to be looking for, but this is one that I am sitting on the ask for right at this 50 or 65.50, right underneath of it. And simply because, you know, I didn't get the fill on this name before it made this run, but this could be a level that needs to be respected. And this does have a large gap up, so it might need to work out some tweaks, which is why I say, you know, 61, here's your 61 level. You kind of have, you know, this is a little bit higher than 61, but I'd say you have really good support down into this 60 flat, which is this previous high. And then that 59, you know, it gaps up from 58.88. If it wants to retrace all the ways down to this gap, you know, you're kind of holding the bag down to that level. So if it makes that type of move, you know, uh, position accordingly. But we do have a dividend that's coming up. It's not the greatest dividend, but relative strength is really strong in this name. And like I said, I really like the earnings report with this name. So, yeah, nothing to really brag about with this name on the day. We can go look at the 15-minute chart. As you can see, before I did have a channel set, and with this, something like this. So, in my eyes, this is kind of just holding the channel in a sense. You can see we actually wicked to the top end of the channel. So, I mean, if the market wasn't as strong as it was, maybe you could trim. You know, it gaps up, fills the gap, from the gap fill ran 1.5%. So I mean, there is something that's building there potentially. But why that channel is set like this, if you flip it over to a 30-minute chart, you can see it has yet to set a close underneath or on top of this channel. So that's why my channel would be set like that. Overall, I think that it's possible that this name can catch a bid and start to get up into these higher price ranges up here, simply because relative strength is high and the earnings report. So that was the second sticky note that we posted for the day, 13 views. MSOS. Now I'm gonna level with you guys. I didn't get my fill that I wanted on this name, and I almost just marketed it in at a higher price. I missed this one just by a couple pennies. So we'll go take a look at this, but I said MSOS, it's a cannabis ETF, murmurs of safe banking, which has been something that's been needed for cannabis companies for a long time. It's embarrassing that they don't have it. But if they can pull off the safe banking for these cannabis ETFs, and the way I understand it is they're not allowed to because it's on a federal level, it's not legalized, so states and so different states just are it's just not there yet the on a legal level. But it did have a huge volume spike, incoming positive break on relative strength, so that is very appealing to me. Still has previous lows to fight through around this 6 to 625. Pullback buys 587 if it gaps, and it did gap up. And then 570 previous highs is also what we state for this name. So let's go take a look at MSOS. Now you can see it shows you that it gaps up. Now where do we wick down to for a low? 591. My order was at 588. So that is very disappointing to come in here on the live stream and say that I missed my order by 3 cents. And just look at the action. So when I had the order out, I seen it gapped up and I said, okay, where's a reasonable spot? I could have easily said, right off this candle body high, put it a couple pennies above 595 or even 6 flat. I could have said, hey, let's just throw the order off 6 flat and let's see if it can work. But looking at this, it did have a nice uptrend right here that it was holding. It looks like it's kind of given up that a little bit. So, who knows? Maybe I can still get that fill. Where I'm going to average into this one a little bit. But you can see 584 is where it says it closes at on a 15-minute chart. If you go over to the daily, you can see 587 is actually the official close that this name had. So that's where I'm going to be looking to pick up some shares of this ETF. If there's any weight to it, of course, and obviously a lot of volume coming in this compared to its relative average. The last time we seen volume around this range was, when it was kind of a falling knife right here. Relative strength was really weak, so more than likely I'd say this is a lot more shorting than buying. But over here is the other area where it was actually pretty close to breaking out for it tested over near these highs over here, and obviously it gets hard rejected, which is probably why we see more volume. But now it's settled down. So this is when you hear me on a sticky note talk about, let it settle down. This is kind of what I'm looking for. Light volume all the way through, and it shows you once the gap up, it retraces almost down to that gap, and now we're getting back-to-back days of this increased volume, and you're getting a fresh positive break. Where the last time we had a positive break, kind of faked out some longs. It did have a trend line in some way, shape, or form building in right here, where it actually backtests the bottom of it before we get bearish for a move down. But I would say I'm optimistic about this name. I think that this is going to be a winner for me. That doesn't mean that it's going to pan out. Who knows? Maybe we need to work down and actually fill this 520 gap where we gap up. We never were able to retrace down to there. But who knows? So maybe this just fakes us out. But if we pull back down into this 570 range, I'm definitely going to be a buyer around this range right here if it pulls back in the 570. So that is MSOS. No fills on this name today. This was the next sticky note that we posted. NASDAQ, still trading in the descending channel, catching a bid. Could wait for a channel break in either direction. Dash, NQ is relatively strong. Long plays are there if it breaks out. I mean, do we even need to talk about this one, guys? Let's just go look at the IXIC. Or let's pull up this chart because I already have some levels built on it, I believe. So let's go into a 15-minute channel, and we could go look at the NASDAQ futures if we wanted. So the channel I'm referring to, this ties in to the Fed meeting day, where, for a channel or a trend line, I would like to see 3 points of contact. Well, this was the third point of contact, blows right through it. But then also you can see if we make this a nice parallel channel, pull this down. Just connecting the lows here, guys. Nothing fancy. Just simple technical analysis. It respects this low, and we gap up and we blow right through it. Now, if you were looking at the relative strength on a 15-minute chart, you can see we get that positive break right here, pretty much right off the open. Blows through the trend line. Now, you get a consolidation period right here. Now, when you take out this high right here, here's where the long is. Now, if you were looking to buy the pullback, just from the index itself, let's say you took an entry right here as, maybe you were waiting for a pullback to the top end of this descending channel, you had a 0.71% move to the current price that we're at right now. Now, if you're running this with like uh, a leveraged ETF right here, like the TQQQ, where it's a little bit more volatile, you get the same exact pattern, and then from this consolidation period, a nice 2% run in the NASDAQ. So I state that the longs are there. If it can break this channel, it breaks the channel. It sort of puts a back test towards that channel. And I mean, just look at the watch list over here. Are you seeing some of these names? I mean, we're still on the 4% movers right here. We just go into the 3%. We're still scrolling down. Still moving down. We're still in the 2% movers right here. Guys, there was a lot of movement today in the market and a lot of opportunities for longs. So I would say that was a pretty successful sticky note, and I did take some trades outside of the sticky note that I'm pretty happy about. So the next one, stay away sticky note, Square. I thought honestly, I'm not a fan of this name. I posted a couple sticky notes about Square, and I'm not a fan of them. But I thought their earnings were pretty decent, except for the share dilution. Share dilution is the silent killer for hundreds and hundreds of names in the stock market. And, if you really like Square, I would say just take a look at PayPal. If if you really like Square, PayPal is just a little bit ahead of the game than Square is. Can Square still work some things out? Yes, of course they can. But from the open price, it's still under 62. Now, I said yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, that until this name gets over 62, the shorts are going to be in control of this name. Now, you have the trend line around 58, and you have a $54 gap as your downside, is what I state. So let's go take a look at Square. I seen that it was pretty weak on the day, and it still is. It's down 2.25%. So even off of a pretty decent earnings report for this name, and a very, very bullish day in the market, this name is down over 2%. Here's your opening candle. Now it actually ekes above that 62 just briefly, just a little bit. If we even go to a 1 minute chart, we can see how short it traded here at this range. You probably had a minute, maybe 30 seconds of trading above that 62. And what happens? My opinion is that the shorts came in on the name. Some people maybe say, hey, people were just selling in the 62. But look at the hard rejection that this name gets. Straight to the downside. You get a retracement, and now you actually are trading below the low of the initial move to the downside when the market has been strong all day. The market's been strong all day. So let's go take a look at the daily for this name now. Why is 62 such a big level? One, you have the previous low that you're trying to fight against. Two, you have a clear downtrend here. Now, this is why I say wait for the break over 62. If it breaks over 62, it doesn't mean, hey, instant snap your fingers, buy it right now. No, watch for it to hold that 62 a little bit. Why? Because this is a relatively weak name. You see how it's just hovering around this oversold area. Now, because it's oversold doesn't mean that, oh, it's oversold. That means if I buy it, eventually it's going to be overbought. No, that's really not how it works. Dealing with relative strength can be a tricky thing, of course. But I would say you definitely have a clear downtrend, and even if it's able to get over 62, I don't think that the short is over because one, it's still relatively weak, and you're going to have another downtrend that you're going to have to face right here. Now, what I state to the downside on how you have this uptrend is if you connect these lows with this wick bottom, this is probably an uptrend right here as you've had one, two, three, and now 4 points of contact. If it gives up this trend line, your downside risk is going to be this $54 gap for now. Now that gap fill is actually officially at 53.91. I just round up a little bit, but you also have another gap fill that gets filled right here. So this could be your downside risk, these low 50s. Now if that even gives out, you could actually have downside risk on this name down to this $40 gap, which is why I say, is it worth it to trade this name right now? In my opinion, I don't think it's worth it. That's just my opinion, of course. So I did mention that, if you really like Square, you can maybe go take a look at PayPal, where PayPal is a name that I hold. I've held it into relative weakness a couple times simply because I like this support that it's holding right here. But also what I like about it is that, you have this gap fill, it fills it on the money. So buyers clearly like this name right here. But I didn't make any sticky notes about PayPal simply because, they have an earnings report after hours on Monday. Am I going to go out there and recommend people to buy this name into the earnings report? I don't know. It's a tough one to say, but relative strength, this is where the big players are at, in my opinion. Right at this middle ground on relative strength. You're going to have people that are looking to go short. You're going to have people that are looking to go long. This earnings report is going to be a big name. If it's able to break over top of this, call it 77. Why do I say 77? Is because if I pull this 77 line over, you can see that it did show the strength to fill that gap. Now, clearly the buyers didn't come in on the middle of this green move, but the buyers did come in on the support. Now, that could have been helped with a green market today, but all in all, if it can break over top of that, anybody short off this gap is going to be out of the money. They're going to have to cover in some way, shape, or form. So that over 77 could be the catalyst for further move, maybe even over top of this 78, and maybe we can get a run up to this $85 gap, insinuating, from current price. This could be due for a 13% run, maybe even more if it's able to get there. So PayPal, you could throw that one on the watch list, and I will be looking through the earnings report and the call for this name. So that was the Square update. The next one that we have, another stay away note. SoFi, yes, it's over 5. It's still a relatively weak name, and I think that the shorts are there, 5 to 550. In particular, 525 is your previous lows. And 547 gap, I think you're going to have to work through some of that range before this is able to make a move higher. But that doesn't mean that's how it's going to happen. It's still sitting at this 515 range. Now just breaking down this 518 to 525, this is your previous lows right there. That's one of the first notes that I put down on the sticky note. And also, you're going to have to work through. There's some clear resistance coming in on this name, in my opinion. I would say you also have a clear descending channel. It's probably set right there. You have a false breakout right there is how I'd look at that. But looking at this, clear descending channel building right there. Now also, what do you see? You see the 547 gap right there, which is right in the levels where if somebody wants to short it, they're going to be looking for the short right in this range. So, you could even say start of the gap fill, which runs over to these 525 lows. And this is going to be a shorting window. So this is why even though it's a green name, it reclaimed 5, you get the gap up over 5, which, if you took it right from the open, not a half bad move, but if we go over to a 15-minute chart, you can see it's already building the flat top right here. You know, all it would take is for this to put a red candle to the downside, and just like that, it rolls over. And how does it act at 490? Okay, if it gives up 490, how does it act at these lows? You know, that's why this name could easily see some downside risk, and that's why I would just stay away from it. That's how I would play that name. Stay away from it. Next one we have airlines, DAL and AAL. This is Delta and this is American. Can it reclaim 34? Has a nice trend line hold. Does it hard reject the gap at 34.13? My dog is being very needy. So let's go take a look at DAL. Now it did claim. Look at this, guys. Look at this. Reclaims 34. Now, we put wicks into 34. If you were looking to buy the consolidation or take a breakout, you know, more than likely your early entry as it tries to break 34, the retest of these highs, look at the buying pressure, look at the volume spike that it gets intraday, and now we have filled this gap. So as of right now, this is not a hard rejection of this gap. Now looking more over at the daily chart, let's just clear this out right here. Here's your uptrend hold. You know, I'd say that's a wick into the uptrend. In my book, that's a wick into the uptrend. And why is this an uptrend? Is because you have a nice parallel trading channel right here. If this wants to catch a bid, all it would take is for this to, you know, probably break over top of these wick highs right here, which, you know, you have gap free. You have your 50-day, that's probably meeting in right around in that range. If it reclaims the 50, you know, respect 60 or 36, respect the previous low, respect the gap fill, and if you can work through all those levels, you know, this name could easily, you know, give you a move up to the top end of the channel. I think this is a good name, one that I'm going to be looking to add to. As you can see, relative strength is getting you really close to that positive break. All it's going to take is a nice green candle through these wick tops, and this is relative. And this name is going to be relatively positive on strength. So yes, that was DAL. AAL, kind of the same look. Now this one hasn't really broke out yet, but it didn't pull back as much yesterday, and it kind of held the levels. Now I said that this name could break out if it gets over 14. There's 1407. Those wick highs, and then here's your gap fill at 1430. You know, it's actually a little bit higher. 1432. You know, if it can take out these wick highs, I don't think it's going to have any problem with this gap. It could see a little bit of rejection, but I would expect 14 to hold from that point. Looking over at the 15-minute chart, you can see putting a little bit of red engulfing down. You know, it's wicking into these previous lows. Honestly, I'm not surprised that it started wicking a little bit right there. I would expect buyers to come in. You can see the volume spiking. You know, it could be partially because of the red engulfing candle to the downside. But you know, I'd be surprised if this didn't at least try to test 14. The wick highs on the day are 13.95. I think it's a decent look on the chart if I'm being unbiased. So that was that. And then the banks, patient. Yes, they're green, still relatively weak. Let them settle down. Banks on watch, BAC, BNS, ALLY, and TFC. So we'll go look at these just briefly, and then we will look at a couple other names, and we will call this a day. So yes, they're green on the day. But this, you know, it is trading a little bit above it, but still sitting at the previous lows on the 15-minute, relatively strong. But you can see still relatively weak uh, if we're just looking at relative strength. Now, one thing that I will say is you do have a descending channel right here that you're gonna have to worry about. There's your descending channel. Now, why I want to see a little bit more pullback, in particular with BAC, is this is the gap fill. This is the gap fill I want to see. Now, this could be looked at as a left leg, double bottom, extended right leg. So this could be looked at as a neckline, which is right around that 25 flat. Now, it just so happens we're putting in a higher low right here, right around this level. So this is why I say just be a little bit patient with these banks. If you're lucky, you can get this price down in this, where I'm looking at this as a buying window down here. And if you get an exhaustive move, respect the downtrend. You have a parallel channel. If you get a price down here in the low 20s, you have decent support built in over here where it breaks it, test it, retest it. Here's your COVID drop, boom. And this is where a lot of buying came in for this name. And if you were a buyer in these low 20s, you got rewarded. So BAC, one of those names that's on watch. The other one was BNS Bank. This is a Canadian bank, where I'm a little bit more attracted to the Canadian banks, I would say. But this one holding the level. So whereas BAC has that descending channel where it's breaking these levels, BNS has been holding this level. Is it going to give you that exhaustive move down to the equivalent gap of like the mid 20s for BAC, which would be 57 and some change? I could go market a little bit better. But if this wants to continue holding this level, let's say we trade back down here again and we start retracing back up, this is going to be looked at as a neckline for a left leg, builds the neckline, sets another bottom, and if it can break over, call it a 68, maybe 70, this name is going to be on my watch for sure. You have earnings coming up. This name financially, I'd say, is pretty sound as well. So, BNS, also on that name, Ally. So, let's go take a look at ALLY. Same story, still relatively weak. It is testing the levels, which is these previous lows right here, uh, which call the 2550. If it can show me strength to get over that, it's going to have to fight through a downtrend as well, which you can see the descending channel right here. But if it can fight through these levels, this is another bank that I have on watch, and TFC is another one that's on watch for me. Still relatively weak, yet a dividend coming up. I think you can get this name even lower than this potentially, where your equivalent. This is back at 2011 levels right here. I like this name if it's down here in these low 20s, and I think that you can be patient with some of these banks. So those were all of the sticky notes for the stock market today. Looking at some parlays, I threw a couple parlays out there. Starting with this first one, I say the White Sox are on an 8-game road game, an 8 straight road game loss. So they've lost 8 straight games on the road, and they aren't ready for Green. Hunter Green, he throws heat. So I'd pick the Reds to win by 3. Phillies 4-game losing streak. They end that when they come back home. They've been on a road stretch where, they've also first faced some pretty good teams. They just came out of a series versus the Dodgers. I think when they come back home, the Red Sox are hot, which is why you're getting a little bit better odds, but I think that they can win by 2, especially with Wheeler on the mound. And the Royals. Now, I'm not a fan of betting for the Royals. I'd only bet for the Royals when Keller's pitching. Brad Keller's on the bump. So, and the A's, they're not very good. So I took the Royals to win by 3. 3-leg parlay pays out 20 to 1. I like those odds. Next one, Jays, they're on a losing streak. Eventually, this losing streak is going to break. They've lost a lot of close games, so I think it's reasonable that they can win by 3. The Pirates, they're off to one of the better starts that they've had in a long time. So is it a fluke? I don't know. The only downside that I'd say to this pick is that the Pirates are at home, and the Pirates, they've off to a pretty good start, and the Jays are on a losing streak. But for my picks, Springer for 2 total bases. Springer's due for a couple hits, so I think it's reasonable that you can get that. And Vlad for an RBI is reasonable as well. So those are my 2 parlays. I'll flip over to the stream over here. Doesn't look like we have anyone watching, so that's always lovely to come back and look at. Nothing in the chat. Probably haven't had anybody tune in for it at all. It is what it is. It's a Friday. Everyone's feeling good about themselves because the stock market's been pretty good today, to say the least. But yeah, let's just go take a look at the Nasdaq real quick. It is catching a little bit of resistance, a little bit of profit taking coming into the end of the day. That's reasonable as well. So that was my stock market recap, and I hope you guys enjoy it. If you're watching it back, I appreciate you for watching. And we will see you on next time where we break down everything on Monday. Do it all over again. So, see you.